This video is sponsored by Firefox, the browser where you're in control that's backed by non-profit, not billionaires. But more on that later. I feel like for the past 2 decades, the internet has tried brainwashing me into believing that most modern day problems came from either Gen Z or millennials. Every day my feed gets bombarded with new reasons to hate my own generation. They're lazy, they don't want to work anymore, they're misinformed, entitled brats. They're so easily triggered, we made up the word snowflakeism for it. This of course coming from the same newspaper that published a scathing article on the now New York mayor because they were offended he didn't recognize a song in a podcast interview. For years now, the media will look you straight in the eye and tell you that Gen Z is the dumbest and least productive generation. They can't help themselves but waste money on those Starbucks coffees instead of a house. Problem is that on the surface, they sound right. Gen Z is struggling in school. Reading comprehension is at an all-time low. We are worse at math, are experiencing more unemployment, and can't buy houses. The thing is that for all of this to happen, it can't be the fault of the generation it is happening to. Did they just pop out of the womb and unilaterally decide, screw society, I'm gonna be bad at math? No! I personally made that decision in 3rd grade. In reality, these modern day problems weren't caused by Gen Z nor millennials. Yet we're the ones getting dragged through the mud for it every single day for the past decade. So I want to talk about the real culprits, the generation ironically blaming everyone else for the damage they caused. The richest generation in history. Baby boomers.
Okay, boomer, yeah, boomer. Whatever you say, boomer. Okay, boomer, yeah, boomer. Whatever you say, boomer.
The American people don't know how good they have it.
Since last video I made a guillotine that automatically targets billionaires, I think it's only fair I now talk about the generation that caused so many billionaires to exist in the first place. So don't get triggered, grandpa. See, there really is no one better at shifting blame for the current state of the world than baby boomers. Gen Z is lazy for being unemployed. Yeah, well, we're trying to get jobs. But the majority of companies prioritizing shareholders over hiring and training young graduates right now are owned by boomers. Gen Z is uneducated. Yeah, maybe that's because boomers spent decades supporting legislation undermining public education. I shouldn't pay for school taxes. I don't even have kids. Yeah, and my grandpa died, but I'm still gonna pay for your social security. Defunding schools, preventing public infrastructure from being built. Also, they can pay fewer property taxes on their 4th house, of course. Look at what's happening in the housing market right now. Real estate sucks ass for anyone who doesn't own a home already. Yet it is also one of the most profitable markets to be in right now for anyone who does. And with 40% of real estate wealth being owned by boomers, with 26% being owned by 70-plus-year-old geriatrics, while Gen Z isn't even at double digits. There's really only one generation profiting here. But then why the fuck are they being the loudest complaining about it? Rich CEO says Gen Z should stop buying Starbucks coffee to buy home. Born in 62, boomer. Millionaire says if you want to buy a house, stop buying avocado toast. Okay, boomer. How about you buy a home instead of spending it all on rotisserie chickens? Yeah, I had my down payment all saved up. But I just had to spend it all on my rotisserie chickens. I'm sorry, but no amount of gaslighting is going to convince me that saving on my Netflix subscription is going to make that house you're selling at $2 million after buying it for like 7 raspberries 67 years ago any more affordable. Don't do it, 6, 7. Actually, pretty selfish of them now, I think. If it's just for inflation, those 7 raspberries are worth at least $3 million today. For some reason, boomers just seem addicted to being at the center of attention every time a younger generation brings up an issue they now face. At first, I just thought this was their desperate attempt to cling on to relevance. Like I'd be doing if I were 71 years old and as miserable as Kevin O'Leary.
Do I pay $2.50 for coffee? Never. I never buy a frappe latte, blah, 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 woof, woof, woof.
But looking at their history, it's actually much worse. Just like how I think the average browsing experience is getting much worse. Luckily, this video is sponsored by Firefox. You guys know that unlike boomers boasting about shrimp cheeses, I don't like generative AI. I've made several videos about it. So guess my environmental damage that comes with it. And when I do, I won't get a single pop-up about it. No. You sure you don't want to grab this? Yes, I am. Also, shouldn't that AI be in jail? Although I do like non-intrusive assistance tools I'll use anyways while browsing, like seamless translation, so I don't have to go out of my way to use some third-party translation tool. It just makes me more productive, and I don't really valuable for boomers. I really appreciate that in a sea of enshittification and AI slop taking over other major browsers, Firefox gives me full control. So if you want to improve your browsing experience, just download Firefox via the link in the description. It's completely free, they're backed by a non-profit, and they're not owned by billionaires, which is great, so I don't have to use that guillotine I made last video. It's 1944, the Allies are turning the tide in World War II, and the US government is suddenly staring down the barrel of a massive problem. 16 million highly trained, heavily traumatized combat veterans are about to come home whenever this war ends and compete in the job market all at once. A barrel that had already shot them in the head 12 years ago, when thousands of World War I veterans protested on the doorstep of Washington for being left to their fate during the economic collapse of the Great Depression, which ended up with government police killing 2 protesters and commanding the US military to fight against these struggling veterans. Nothing a little government crackdown won't fix. Let's not repeat the same mistakes. Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the GI Bill, which would give returning World War II veterans access to an abundance of support once the war was over. Full tuition for college, low interest mortgages with $0 down payments, low interest loans to start businesses or purchase farmland, weekly unemployment pay. Sounds like a dream. This unprecedented government support boosted the US economy in what is now looked back on as the golden age of capitalism. People started companies, the job market grew, and social welfare with it. Who thought socialist policies could actually boost the economy and improve people's lives? Unless, of course, if you were black, in which case you were locked out of most well-funded universities who didn't accept black students, or banks wouldn't give you those GI Bill mortgage benefits since many house deeds didn't allow black families to buy them. Don't worry though, they won't systematically exclude you when drafting for the Vietnam War. But these are all benefits for the silent generation, right? So then how do boomers who were just born fit into the picture? Well, many of them, obviously not all, now grew up in not only one of the healthiest and most prosperous economy in recorded history, but subsequently households too. They grew up in stable housing, suburbs with gardens, healthy families. But most importantly, drank from garden hoses as they love bragging about on Instagram for some reason. Many boomers grew up in a bubble of unprecedented comfort. That might sound unrealistic to you now, but there were no all-out geopolitical or economic collapses looming around the corner, at least for a few years. No Great Depression, no World War II, both of which their parents just lived through and wanted to prevent their kids from ever experiencing, because when generations suffer, they usually strive for a future where their children won't. So then why the heck are we suffering? Well, that's exactly because many then middle and upper class boomers who are now running the world didn't. The Common Sense book for baby and child care. This book, which I just printed the cover off of and plastered onto my copy of The Hobbit, because I'm not gonna pay $60 for a book that came out in 1946. Well, it took over the US by storm. Said to have been the best-selling book in recorded history, second to the Bible back when it first released. And it taught then new parents that maybe instead of beating your child when they're crying, give them a hug. How about you talk about your child's feelings instead of making them repress them for their entire life? How about you give them a little bit of freedom? Revolutionary. Now I'm all for this, and not about to preach how actually you should punch your child in the face to show them parental love. The problem was that subsequently, with the baby boomer demographic being as big as it was thanks to everyone sucking and fucking after World War II, a literal boom of babies, the entire US media landscape now quickly pivoted to center their marketing around these baby boomers. Now imagine what growing up in a wealthy society that puts you at the center of attention at every turn from the moment you were born does to you. I would know, my parents had a messy divorce when I was 6. Outsiders had taken note of the audacious behavior of young people in this country. Europeans who had taken jobs as camp counselors in the United States in the summer of 1957 were taken aback by the brashness of American children. They said campers were pseudo-mature and superficially self-assured, highly materialistic. Having fun was pretty much all that mattered to these campers, with the descriptor spoiled coming up more than any other. Wait, isn't that what they've been calling us for the past 20 years? Is that like their main problem with the youth today? Those younglings don't respect their elders enough because they're spoiled entitled brats. Jesus Christ, that's hard on my voice. Turns out you end up with the now scientifically proven most narcissistic generation on the planet. Now, for any boomers still watching at this point, first of all, thanks. I appreciate you. And just want to say, I'm not trying to overgeneralize. I know not all of you are like this, but as you'll see in this video, there are systematic issues that came from your generation. Because many middle and upper class boomers naturally grew up self-centered with no understanding of societal struggle, and definitely not of economic struggle. When boomers started going to college, annual tuition was $256. That's $2,600 adjusted for inflation, because their parents and companies paid high taxes, allowing state governments to heavily fund public universities. Today, you have to pay 4 times that, but at least your degree is now also worth a lot less. You could work a minimum wage summer job for a month and a half and go to college debt-free. In fact, student loans were so rare that they were actually set up to give ambitious students a choice to go into debt only if they wanted to attend more expensive private colleges. But even those were much cheaper than they are today. So most boomers started their career debt-free. Now the average student is already $42,000 in debt before they even graduate. From others avocado toast, of course. Wages were higher even if you didn't get a college degree. Necessities were cheaper. Labor unions held the most power they ever held. These were all benefits their parents fought for. You could get a brand new car for $1,700. Houses cost like $15K, and most middle-class boomers are already going to inherit properties that their parents bought using GI Bill benefits. Now this all sounds great. So I know exactly what happened, but I imagine it kind of went like this. Hey man, isn't life awesome? Yeah, bro, I got a house, a job, wife and 2 kids, and all that on one person's salary. Right on, man. Oh my god, we're at war? Wait, what? Mortgage rates are rising to double digits? Huh? Okay, what's important is that we just take a deep breath. Every generation has its struggles. What we really should do is go to politicians that come up with short-sighted, selfish solutions that will benefit us, but will destroy society in the long term. Hi, I'm the US government, and I'm gonna shoot myself in the face. Huh? Why? It'll lower your taxes. Yay! Or something like that. The Vietnam War suddenly added an enormous amount of spending to the government's budget. And because they were trying to fund the war overseas while simultaneously paying for these domestic social programs at home, they had to get the money somewhere while not committing political suicide by raising taxes. So they printed more money. and then they printed some more money. I'm not an economist, so correct me if I'm wrong, but apparently printing billions of dollars to make bombs to drop overseas doesn't provide any goods or services in the benefit of American society. Weird. So with now a less valuable dollar, mostly the poor, working and middle class getting drafted, and upper class citizens dodging the draft, a move that apparently can make you president of the United States. And all this followed by the oil crisis of 1973. An economic crisis ensued. Businesses stopped growing. Inflation surged. The unemployment rate increased. All of a sudden, the generation that grew up without struggle had no idea how to handle the situation. And as a result, a lot of them panicked and resorted to pushing short-sighted, selfish solutions as to not lose their own wealth. They elected Ronald Reagan, an actor openly backed by corporate interests who ran his campaign on Riz and cutting the social welfare programs boomers so greatly benefited from. Something he was already known for doing as governor of California. They cheered as he introduced his now infamous trickle-down economics, which lowered taxes across the board, but mostly benefited corporations and the wealthiest while gutting social welfare. Because corporations were now going to invest all that saved tax money in society, right? It's been 50 years. It's about to trickle down any day now. Reagan's pro-corporate stance led to the labor union crackdowns we still see happen today. Yeah, screw those civil rights our parents fought for. Will no one think of the poor corporations? But worst of all, they fucking re-elected him. And then he lowered the highest wealth and corporate taxes even more in his second term. But to give him some credit, he did increase poverty and inequality. And if that wasn't enough, boomers now started fighting against affordable housing to keep their property value growing. And I'm not talking about like wealthy corporations. These were middle-class boomers in town halls pushing back against new housing being built. Like this was an actual movement now called NIMBYism. Not in my backyard. Yeah, Grandpa, don't worry, because now we can't even afford backyard. This entire era vastly accelerated the shareholders over employees mentality, prioritizing quarterly earnings and stagnating workers' wages, causing a surge in billionaires. And not just houses or tuition, but everything to become more expensive. But hey, who cares? Boomers already had their affordable degrees and real estate wealth. I guess the kids are just gonna have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Except they just cut off those bootstraps. This entire societal ladder pull, where they gradually took away almost every beneficial system prior generations built up for them, is seen as so selfish. They're now often referred to as the most narcissistic me generation. Which you can even see when looking back at like their anti-Vietnam protests. Obviously, many boomers protested out of pure selflessness. But the majority who protested against this war and acted as if it was because young Americans and innocent Vietnamese families were being killed. Well, stop protesting the moment Nixon made army service optional. Most of them didn't care about the human atrocities their government enacted. In fact, majority of boomers really liked war. They just didn't want to get drafted. Which I get, but the same people now act as if they cared about both. Many Woodstock hippies had no problem voting for Reagan and his corporation's first policies once they realized that they would then pay fewer taxes on the social safety nets they had already used because Reagan was gonna cut them. And what's worst of all is that they fucking got away with it. By the time their decisions negatively impacted society, boomers heavily controlled the media, so they could shift the blame to whomever they wanted. 33% of boomers still blame us for the housing crisis in 2025. What are you looking at us for? You guys scalped them all. And it doesn't help that this rhetoric is being promoted by every single social media algorithm. Every time I see someone blame Gen Z or millennials for something we didn't do, it goes viral. And because viral equals money, now these absolute soulless money-hungry influencers doing these stupid street interviews. Gen Z can't answer basic questions. Gen Z versus everyday logic. Dumb NPCs can't answer extremely simple questions. Where you ask like 50 young people some useless question they themselves clearly had to Google the answer of. Hope that at least one of them says something stupid so they can hit it with them. Clip that and earn tens of thousands a month doing so. Which like these interviews would work on any generation. Just imagine doing them with boomers today. Hi, sir, do you know how to plug in an HDMI cable? Do you have a wife? Yeah, this is her right here. That's AI. She has 4 boobs. That's a condition, you insensitive prick. Honestly, I'd say an entitled boomer having a public meltdown at like Olive Garden.
What you been here on 23 years ago? Customers coming here, they're first. The telephone is second. The most important person, I'm not restaurant. You're the first in front of you. You told me to wait. You get older. The Lord will sit right there the whole time. I'll sit right here. But 30 minutes, you're on the go.
You're such a liar. I just saw you walk in 2 minutes ago. You're an asshole.
You're a asshole. Fuck you. Piece of shit.
You're ugly as fuck. Get out of here.
Just like him.
You probably don't have one, dude.
It's way more entertaining than watching like a 20-year-old Gen Z crying because their dreams just got crushed by a system they didn't break. I know, man. I just think that the state of the world we're currently in, where most people in power are baby boomers, we should start pushing back against the rhetoric that we created society's problems. Look, as a teenager, both social and traditional media taught me to hate my own generation for the state we got the world handed to us. And I know, but I don't think we should. Honestly, I couldn't be more proud of my generation, who, even with everything going on in their own lives right now, keeps fighting for the people around them, the environment, class divide, and every atrocity currently going on in the world. Because they're inherently decent people. And I only wish that through our struggles, we'll be able to build a better world for future generations. And I gotta start by talking about that better browser again. I do a lot of research for my videos, and I like doing so in private for reasons. But I know my deep dives will just end up being tracked in other major browsers, even in private mode, where they might not save local browsing history, but still track everything else. But in Firefox private windows, they actually block ad trackers, social media trackers, and third-party cookies by default. I can even enable my browser extensions like AdBlocker in private mode. Something you better never do on my videos, but also remember missing in other major browsers. So thanks again, Firefox, for sponsoring this video. Go check them out. This not just supports the channel, but it's also a